Where it makes the biggest impact is like at a copper smelting or something like this, where you take in huge power usage and you have things, you come across things that, okay, here's a furnace that runs at 1750 degrees. Now we're shut down for 3 days. Do I leave it at 1750? Do I turn it off completely? Do I bring it down to 1,000 degrees? And this is, you have to do some engineering, and you have to work. And this is the kind of thing you're encouraged to do, is you look at those kind of things and you decide, well, what makes sense? What's the money saver? And then what can we improve? What can we go with higher efficiency on?
So it's you will think that then it is companies that are already way up in the food chain of being, I guess, having a good understanding of management system and what is to improve, and having a team that they can dedicate to do some homework, I guess, right?
Yeah, this is a little more engineering centric than the other standards, and it sometimes focuses more on engineering and facilities than it's a little bit different group that's doing this.
So another question I had is, like, is there any way, when you say, they have to do all this engineering work, at least to now, I mean, are there any tools? Like, how do they track their utilities, or how can they do like an energy audit to know where all this energy
Yeah, that's the first thing that you have to do. You have to do a baseline.
Baseline, yes.
And you have to decide what your baseline is. And that's oftentimes done through meters, either permanent or temporary, that are installed.
Okay.
This is where I learned for the ISO people out there on calibration on the electric meters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when are you going to calibrate that? Well, tracing it down with the companies that make the meters, and they recommend maybe every 5 or maybe 25 years or something. They last long. Apparently you don't need to calibrate them. But what you have to do is you have to determine what your energy baseline is. And then you have to determine what makes up the constituent parts of where the energy, what is using all this energy, right? What are your high energy users? And then you have to somehow relate it to, or normalize it to your production or to your product mix, to the weather, you have to be able to do that so that you can get what you're really.
Now, on your experience, you've performed some baseline audits, I guess. And you perform audits later, I guess that's the idea.
That's the idea, is that you need to determine what your significant energy users are. And most people have a pretty good idea, but they don't have them measured. So you've got to find a way to measure them. And then from that, you'll do the baseline.